everyone. I'm Dr. Renee Mera. Welcome to my new show on popular demand, Immigration Matters. And my guest is attorney Banad Viswanath, the principal attorney from the Banad law offices that primarily deal with U.S. immigration, consular, and nationality law. Dave Vishwanath has extensive experience in dealing with U.S. embassies and consular posts in several countries around the world and has offices in New York, in Manhattan and Queens, as well as in India, in Mumbai and Bangalore, and New Delhi is on the way. Thank you very much, Dave. Known you for a very, very long time. So it's great to talk. There's so much to talk to you about, but let's talk about the end of birthright citizenship.
Sure. Well, thank you, Renee. I mean, it's great to sort of be with you on camera again. You know, we've
Yes.
sort of gone through this in very capacities, lots of capacities before. But let's talk about immigration. So, the end of birthright citizenship. Now the 14th Amendment to the Constitution has a provision in it that essentially says that people that are born on U.S. soil are, as of right, U.S. citizens. Okay. Now, and there's been, I don't want to say that President Trump or this administration is the only one who's ever talked about this. There has been a underbelly in the United States that has believed that people should not automatically have the right to citizenship just by birth on this on the soil. Jus soli is what it's called in Latin. And there are many countries that don't allow for that. There are many countries where even if you're born there, you're not considered a citizen.
If your parents are not legal?
Well, no, we haven't even gotten to that part. That's
okay.
There are some countries in the world where whether or not you're born there or not does not matter as it pertains to citizen if your parents are not citizens of that country, if you're not ethnically from that country. Now the United States, for a variety of reasons, including its history, created this, well, if you're born here, you're a citizen, right? Because we had a lot of different people. We had French, we had British, we had the Irish that came in later, we had the Italians and the Poles. And even smaller groups of East Asians and the Chinese that were working on the railroads, and then slavery at the time when slaves became free. So there were a lot of different components that a lot of countries in the world just don't have. Many countries in the world are pretty homogenous. And when you have these sort of multicultural cities, a lot of times work authorization and the ability to live is really what the countries believe is the maximum amount that anybody can have. But the United States took a position that, look, we're a young country, and in a lot of ways, it helps to build nationalism. It helps to build a sense of being here. What has happened over the years is that, the United States is a lot more polarized in some ways than it may have been in its foundation. Some would argue that that's not the case, and it was extremely polarized then. But of those who created the country, the vision of those who were building the country is the way to create a sense of ownership in this country is to make sure that people believe that they are a citizen of this country. Now, when we have a population in the United States of somewhere around 333 million people, and we have probably 180 million people that are of European descent, and then the split amongst other groups. What has been growing in the United States, whether we take the inclusion of African Americans and Hispanics and indigenous people, is that we have developed a resentment in a small group, but a vocal group of people who say, look, all these people are coming in, they're becoming citizens. Half of them don't even speak English properly. English is the language of the United States, and they don't want to accept that there might be other languages here, or if they are, they're fringe languages. They're not a part of the country, and they, these people come over, and in 10 years they're U.S. citizens. If you are a permanent resident, from permanent residence to citizenship, you could potentially get it done in under 6 years. But now this is birthright citizenship. Now this has to do, and what happened in terms of the contention is that people would come into the United States, some of them on visitor visa, and then have a baby here. And all of a sudden that baby is now a U.S. citizen. Yeah. And the reality of things is people started to manipulate that a little bit and make it sound like, well, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are doing this. It's actually not a very large number, but there are people that have come to the United States and they've had babies here, and when that child turns 21, and there are people that have done that. They've been here on visitor visa. They've remained here for 30 years or 21 years. Their child turns 21, and now the child files for them, and all of a sudden they become permanent residents.
Yeah.
A lot of people in this sort of contentious area have said that's not right. You sort of came up through a back door and you use your child as what they called an anchor, right, to stay in the United States. There are also people who come into the United States and end up in deportation proceedings. And then they use that child as a way to get a hardship or to get some sense of security, so that they can argue that if you kick me back to my country, this U.S. citizen child will suffer greatly. And so there are a lot of people.
Now, what happened, let's say, when the child was born, the parents were not citizens, they were illegal at that time, but few years down the road, they became legal.
Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, so the Constitution is pretty clear on this, and the courts have historically been very clear on this, that, look, born in the U.S., you're a U.S. citizen. Now, if we think about it, we take the position that people born in other countries can be U.S. citizens. We take the position that if it's a U.S. territory, we take the position that if you're in a consulate, when you're on the consulate grounds, that's U.S. soil. The Panama Canal, when it was administered by the United States, John McCain, for example, was born in the Panama Canal. When people are born in Hawaii or born in before it became a state, or people are born in Puerto Rico or Guam, there are rules that come up because of where you are born, and they have interpreted that from the Constitution. Now, what President Trump has done in his executive order has said, we're going to end birthright citizenship, right? That means do not give it to people if they can't prove that their parents aren't legally in the United States. Okay. Now, this is also on the heels of another thing, right? Some of this contention has come from the southern border issues. And I want to say, to be honest, it's northern and southern, because the Canadian border has a lot of porous areas too, and people are coming in plentifully from there as well. But the southern border has been sort of, if you want to say, too much. It's overcome the threshold. So what happens is all of these people come into the United States, and if they came in as couples or they end up with relationships, they start having babies, and now those babies are citizens. And in the media, there's an immediate draw to, and now they're going to use these children to stay here. The truth is that number is really very, very low. First of all, if you enter the border without inspection, you can't even become a U.S. permanent resident by that child just like that, because you need to show that you were admitted or paroled. So you have to be inspected by an officer and let into the United States, or paroled into the United States, in order to become a permanent resident.
But the child is not a U.S. citizen now at this point of time, from February 19th of 2025.
So what President Trump said was, we are going to end. Now, first of all, there are arguments about whether or not he even has the power to do this. I think most would say that he does not have the power to do this in and of itself. However, what he has been able to do is instruct Post Office, instruct the Department of State, instruct federally funded hospitals, do not issue birth certificates, issue passport facilitation. So that's where they can sort of stop it. Whether or not you're a U.S. citizen.
So you mean to say, like, the hospital going to ask the parents, like, are you legal before the baby's delivered?
Correct. That's the concern. So now this is already being litigated, and many of us believe that it'll go to the Supreme Court. And there are already some lower courts that have ruled that it's not possible. Okay. But this is a hugely hot topic, and there's no doubt in my mind that it'll go to the Supreme Court, because whether it's the administration or the local populace, either side is going to want a final rule on this. Not a lot of people are talking about this, but I do believe, and it's definitely something that I've been thinking about, that the Supreme Court may say that while if you came in on a visa or you were paroled into the United States, so you were inspected and admitted to the United States, even if your status lapsed later, any child born to that person will be a U.S. citizen in honor of the Constitution. But if you entered the United States without inspection, so there was no border patrol officer, no immigration officer that let you into the US, right? In those situations, that person was never legally here, and therefore your child was not legally born in the United States. It wasn't born in the United States. And so those children are not US citizens. And I could see the Supreme Court going in that direction. And it's going to be an interesting argument because the Constitution doesn't make that differentiation, and the Supreme Court is going to have to interpret the idea about living or being born on the soil as sort of a legal nuance. Mm-hmm. Now, this brings up another issue, which is conservatives. If they were under the sort of Justice Scalia approach to conservatism, were literalists. They would look at the language of the Constitution and say, that's it. Born on U.S. soil, born on U.S. soil. This neoconservative new group of conservatives, they're actually much more willing to interpret the law, interpret the Constitution to sort of fit into what they believe the state of America is or the state of America should be. Some people have called that activist, judiciaries. A lot of times it's been accused from the left side or the more progressive justices. But we are seeing a more robust conservative, judicial branch, and they seem perfectly fine with interpreting the law to suit those needs.
So this executive order applies moving forward, not like babies were born, let's say, 21 years ago.
Correct. Although it's not, as many of the rules that have come up in the last 50 days or so, since January 20th. A lot of those rules are not clear when it trickles down to the different agencies. So if you, just for example, had a child that was born 20 years ago, and somehow that child never applied for a passport before, and it was born to parents without any proof of entry, and now they go to the passport office or they go to the U.S. Post Office to try to apply for the passport, I could see a postal worker saying, well, I'm not going to help you right at this moment because our president said this, and it has not been vetted enough to make it clear, that you won't be affected. But however, what you're suggesting in theory should really be the case, that look, if you've from the date that he made the executive order moving forward, those people should be affected, but anybody prior to that really shouldn't. They should be grandfathered. President Trump is going to get, my belief is that he's going to get a bone here. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to turn him down 100%. But that's only based on some other rulings by the court more recently. And if they do decide that birthright citizenship is something that's constitutionally mandated for anybody born here, then I think that it's going to be a highly divided court.
Now, let's talk about there's an indefinite freeze on the temporary status from people coming from Ukraine and Latin America.
Yeah. So, I think the best way to look at this is, what is temporary protected status, right? Temporary protected status was created because there were individuals that were here, whether legally or not, but were in a position where they could not be returned to their own country because either infrastructure had happened, natural disaster, whatever the situation was. And it was overwhelming. So the Department of State, in conjunction with the president's office and for diplomatic reasons, made a decision that individuals from those places would be protected from going back there. That was true in Haiti because of civil unrest. Then they had the earthquakes. It's true in Nepal with the earthquakes. It's true in Ukraine because of the war. They had Cuba, Nicaragua, several countries where there was problems there. Now, if someone said, well, where's the mathematical equation to how a country's decided? There is none. It's diplomatic. The Department of State, in conjunction with the president's consultation, decides who's going to be included in TPS. Venezuelans were included, under what the United States government considered a socialist slash communist government in Venezuela. They wanted to make sure that they protected individuals similar to the way they looked at Cubans. Now, with President Trump's order taking temporary protected status out of the way, what you will find is many individuals immediately put into deportation proceedings or given a certain period of time to leave the United States without any repercussion. Now, another interesting part is people who say, look, I can't go back there for whatever reason. The United States seems to be moving in the direction, and we haven't really seen this in the last 15 or 20 years at least, seems to be moving in a direction where they'll take the position that if we can get you to some other place that's not your home country, it's not the US either, we'll do that. And it reminds me of, anybody who knows about sort of history and sort of the history of Australia, or even Montreal for that matter, taking people that were in those contexts criminals or outside the realm of what people considered normal society and throwing them there. That's what I see in this. Let's just take all of these undocumented or all of these immigrants and throw them into Guam, for example, because, and then what are you going to do when you're in Guam? Most likely, a good portion of them might try to go back home if they can. Another group of them is going to settle in Guam. And so they're going to settle in Panama. They're going to settle in Costa Rica. They're going to settle wherever in whatever country allows them to come in now, because you got to start a life. You can't just keep on moving around. And it was for many of these people, it was death defying to come to the United States. Yeah. Once they go into a place where, it might not be that easy for them to go to their home country.
They go back to their home country, or they have to go to whichever country. That it could be any other place that immigration authorities tell them to go.
Right. And now President Trump, through the Department of Homeland Security, Secretary Noem, they just issued this whole registration thing for people who are undocumented and people that are in the United States without any formal allowance, that they've been mandated to register their names and information and addresses or risk up to $1,000 fine and jail time, criminal charges. That's opening up a can of worms. If you do register, you are processing yourself to leave. The real question is, what difference would it make from you just leaving the United States and on your own, or registering and leaving on your own? So unless you're registering in order to fight the good fight in either detention or deportation, it doesn't make sense to register. Potentially being fined for something you can't even afford to pay.
You see a surge in deportation cases in the last several weeks?
You do. So if we took the big picture of things, and let's just be very frank about it, under President Obama and under President Biden, the numbers of people that were removed from the United States were far higher than under the last 30 years of Republican presidents, okay? Or at least the last 25 years of Republican presidents. What President Trump is doing at the moment is far more aggressive, but it's so early in the game, we can't really tell if the numbers are going to be, excruciatingly high. Mm-hmm. But the things that they're doing are definitely suggesting that they could make those numbers jump exponentially, because there are a lot of people that have been here for 25 or 30 years that are now getting called up to leave the United States. And that's definitely not something that any of the presidents in recent history, modern history, have done.
Now, there's over 3.6 million cases in U.S. courts, immigration cases, such a big backlog. And are they having any prosecutorial discretion in this so that they can dismiss the low priority cases?
Yeah, that's still a little up in the air. In fact, I just had a conversation with a government attorney about a week ago on a case that they agreed to prior to President Trump coming into office, and they were waiting on background checks for this family. And so I reached out to Chief Counsel's office to find out whether that was still good, expecting her to say no, unfortunately, nothing. we can't do anything. And the response that I got from Chief Counsel's office was, we're not able to make a decision one way or the other at the moment. Please check back. So I think that whatever road that goes in, we're going to see it play out now. I can definitely say that the days of prosecutorial discretion, the way we knew them for the last, 6 or 7 years, because even under President Trump's first term, the memo was in place and then he sort of took it away. But the idea of prosecutorial discretion has always been here. It's been there for a long time. So the question is, how restrictive are we going to make it? And the problem that they have is you've got a agenda to get people out, and then you've got what's on the ground practicality. Because if they're cutting jobs and they're kicking out federal workers, then how do you end up also dealing with 3.6 million people, and abide by the Constitution? Because the easiest thing would do would say, hey, come in, out, come in, out, come in, out. Let's do 150 people on a plane and send them away, right? But there's something called a Constitution and there's something called laws, and those have to be implemented as well. And so really what we have at this moment is a situation where a ton of people that may be eligible for deportation, but they've been here for 15 years, 20 years, paying their taxes, U.S. citizen children, in all respects, maybe good residents, if you don't want to say citizens, good residents of the area, parts of the community. And those are the individuals that I think you're still going to have a problem trying to kick out. Because it's like, when we have whatever number of people you want to kick out because of criminal issues or because they're totally under the radar and they don't pay any taxes and they don't have any children, then how are you going to jump at all these individuals who seem to have very rooted, and where's the justification? So I believe that there will be some form of prosecutorial discretion that'll continue, but I think we're going to have to figure out what that looks like. At this moment, what people knew about a year ago, that type of prosecutorial discretion is going to be much less used in today's stage.
Now, those who applied not under asylum, but under Convention Against Torture, there's a little difference between those who applied under asylum and those who applied under Convention Against Torture. There's a withholding of removal in those cases?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. When you apply for asylum, generally speaking, you're actually applying for three things. Asylum, which is protect me from going back to my home country because I am a victim or I have a reasonable fear of being a victim of persecution by a government actor or a non-government actor where the government is unable or unwilling to help me, and because of 5 protected grounds. Race, creed, religion, member of a social group, member of political opinion. Okay. Now, if it's not in that group, then you can't get asylum. Okay. And there are some people for another reason. Maybe they were part of the military in their government. Maybe they were part of a gang, even if it was forced, which precludes them from asylum because they did something that the law says you can't get asylum if you've done this, So then there are these other 2 protections, withholding of removal and withholding based on the Convention Against Torture. Now, those are not pathways to permanent residence or citizenship. They do protect an individual from coming or going back to their home country, indefinitely. So with asylum, it is a pathway to permanent residence, but with withholding of removal or withholding based on the Convention Against Torture, those are temporary protections in place that make sure that you can stay in the United States and not go back to your home country. And they can be based on a lot more than the 5 protected grounds, it could be like, for example, maybe I took a loan from a drug dealer, or a money launderer or a gangster, and now they want to kill me and they have control over the whole country. That may not fit nicely into an asylum ground, but that might be enough if you can show the proof that you're protected from going back to that home country. Now the thing about that is the law says you can't go back to that home country. The position that the United States is taking right now, and ICE has been doing this more recently, usually what happens is People who get withholding or withholding based on CAT still have check-ins with ICE, maybe once every 3 years, once every 5 years, once every year. And ICE will look at the conditions in the home country and decide whether we can send you back or not. The US government at this moment is taking the position that, look, even if we decide we can't send you back to your home country, that doesn't mean we can't send you to some other country that'll take you. And so that's what's happening right at this moment. We have people, I actually had somebody that I knew who was of Chinese descent from Malaysia, but was granted withholding of removal. And she's just chomping at the bits because she knows that there's a decent chance that she'll get a call sometime soon saying, hey, why don't you come in? And they might start calling and saying, you know what? Doesn't matter that you're Chinese from Malaysia. We can't send you back to Malaysia because you've proved that things are too bad for you there. But we're going to ship you off to Panama because they'll accept you, and we don't need to keep you here in the United States. And these are real concerns, and that's happening now.
Well, there's a lot to talk to you about. I think we'll have to do it next time.
Thank you, man.
Attorney Banad Viswanath, the principal attorney from the Banad Law Offices that handles primarily nationality law, U.S. immigration, and consular issues. You have offices, you have it in New York, in Manhattan and Queens, as well as in Mumbai, Bangalore, and now, congratulations, you're going to be having a new office in New Delhi.
Yeah, well, so I've been going to India. I go to India every 3 months. Pretty much every quarter I'm there. And, thank you for that. But I always make sure that Delhi, Bangalore, and Mumbai are on my trips. In fact, the next trip that I make, I'll also be in Gujarat for a couple of days. But it's important because, we have a big community of Indians that do come to the United States, and they need assistance. They need competent assistance. And I'm not trying to tout myself, but this is what I do. And I love doing it. And, I'm a boy from Queens, but my heart is sort of in two worlds. So.
Yeah, we all have been. Thank you. Thank you, Dave, so much. I'm Dr. Renee. Thank you so much for watching Immigration Matters. Stay healthy, stay positive.